Welcome, friends, and thank you for tuning in today. And today we'll be continuing and finalizing on our concept on window functions. There will still be other functions, but once you understand the ones we covered so far, you should be able to relate to the other ones. Okay. Now, today we'll be focusing on positional functions. Okay, and you will have function like first value, last value, lag, lead, and end value. What does all of that does, and what should we keep in mind? And also, in the illustration results here, I've kind of showcased some values here that you can quickly look at. For example, you can see the first amount, which is what it's returning based on this particular partition, right? And we're going to discuss more on that in our demo, okay, in our lab. Okay, so let's quickly run to our lab and then quickly see what that solution looks like. We're going to use the same query we've been using before, but then this time around we're just going to adapt it to what we need it for now. Okay, all right, so let's remove all of these guys. Okay, and then let's run this. Okay, and if you've been following us so far on this window function series, you will notice that this is the query we've been using, and you should be familiar how we got this. Okay, now let's say for example, and I'm going to order these order by one, and let's run this. Let's say for example, within the first window frame, I really need to access the first value. What do I mean by that? Let's say for example, this is ordered by, so basically this is partitioned by customer or I won't say partition at this point, is ordered by customer ID, but we can also order this partition based on the dates, and I think it's ordered based, like as it is right now, is ordered by customer ID order date, right? So what we are basically saying is that, let's say for example, we need to display or we need to return this first value. How do we do it? Now we could use the row number that we talked about, but there is also other ways we can access this. And also, if we want to access this last value here, the last value here, the last value in this other partition, how do we do that? So let's quickly look at that, right? So here we'll say first value. Okay, first underscore value. All right, and then we'll put in the column we're interested in, right? And we can also say over, and then we can say partition by customer ID. And for the first value, we need to declare the order by, so it knows how to order it. Okay, order by, and then we'll say order date. So it's going to default to ascending order, and I won't explicitly, I can actually explicitly mention ascending order, and then I won't mention the frame at this point, the frame clause. Let's just say this is first amount, and so let's run this. So beautiful, guys, you can see here is basically able to order by this date. You can see we have 2012, this is the first one, there's the second one, this is the third one. So its access is returning this value for all the frame. The same thing here as well. This is fantastic. Now one thing you have to keep in mind is that it defaults to the frame, right? Rows, I think we have it somewhere here. I'm just going to copy that. Yes, so this is what we call, so row, so it default to this one. I'm just going to copy and paste it here, right? So it defaults here, so if you run it again, you'll see you get the same value. Okay, keep that in mind. Okay, now let's consider the last value. Okay, and let's look at the last value here. And last value, we would expect we will expect that for this last value column, it should display 2770 for 1100 customer ID, and for 1101 we should get 650. And we're going to see what happens. Again, We're gonna call this last amount, and let's see. Okay, it's not gonna return that. Okay, now guys, you can see it's only returning the current exact value you have is exactly what is returning here. Why is that? Remember in that illustration we have here, or the explanation we have here, we said something here that without explicit frame, last value often returns just the current row. Keep that in mind, okay? Keep that in mind. So, and even from the explanation we had before, saying that if he's gonna look at, if you use this frame, right, within this partition, it's gonna say, okay, basically, what's my current row, what is the preceding value, no value, right, and then it's going to return this as the last row. It's going to look at this and say what's my current row, what's the preceding value, preceding rows, right, and then what's the last value, and it's going to return this, and the same thing is going to do here as well. Now what we need to do is to say this is going to be unbounded following, okay, and we're going to say unbounded following. All right, and then it will work. Why? It's, I'm gonna, let's run it first. You see it's working now. Why? Because it's not gonna look at this current row. What are the rows I have before? No rows. And what are the rows I have after? And I say I have all of these rows, right? And I say, okay, what's now my last value based on the date? This is my last value, and then it's gonna return that. So you see it works perfectly now. All right, just take note of that, okay? And by the way, if you apply the same thing here as well, which I'm gonna do right now, you will see the first value will still work based on that explanation. You see it will still work, right? So let's keep it that way. I want it this way for a particular reason, which I will explain towards the end. Okay, so let's copy this, and we're gonna use this for the other functions as well. So let's say we now want to talk about lag, right? Lag simply means it's going to access the value before the current row. So we could say, for example, return the first value, right? So basically it's going to look at this. Do I have any value before this current row? If not, return null. Let's run it and then we can explain it in details. So why is it returning this value? It's going to look at this and it's going to say, do I have a record or a row before that? Yes, I do. And then we're saying just one, right? So it's going to return exactly that. And it's going to look at here, do I have a value before? And it's going to return exactly that. Now, this is very good when you are doing things like month-to-month calculation, week-over-week calculations, and quarter-by-quarter calculation, and other use cases as well. So just keep that in mind. So let's change this to what do we call that here? Let me quickly look at the name. Okay, we call it previous month amount, and next amount, and third amount. So let's quickly call it that. So we call it previous amount, and then we're just gonna do that for lead. Okay, all right, so we're gonna say for lead. Okay, if you say lead, it's gonna return the rows after the current row. Okay, let's run that. Now we're gonna say next amount. Okay, so let's run that again so it has a proper name of the column. So we can see it's going to look at this current row and say what's the next amount based on the date. This is the next amount. It's going to display that here. Look at here and say what's the next amount. It's going to display that here. And what I can do with this is I can then, because they are all at the same record now, I can subtract, I can do all sort of things just to be able to get whatever the requirement is from the business. Okay, and then the last but not the least here, okay, is now the ends. Let's quickly do that. The end value. So what do we mean by that? Okay, end value. Okay, and then how does that work? It's gonna work similarly, right? But here it doesn't matter whether it's the first or the last. What is going to happen, you can say, for example, 2. So it doesn't matter whether it's rows before or rows after. This can access you know, the rows, whatever rows you want to access within that frame. The only challenge with the end value is that it can be static in nature and not dynamic. So for example, let's run this, and we're just going to say we're going to say second amount in this case, second amount. Okay, and let's just let's it's not taking that. Let's use another value, second amount, and let's run that, see if it works. Beautiful. And then you can see it's accessing this value. Okay, it's accessing just this value. This, if you look at this partition, right, this is going to be the first, second, and third, so it's going to access this value. If you look at this as well, this partition, you're going to see it's going to access this value, and that's what you're seeing here. And you can play around it, you can do all sorts of things. You can, I believe you can use negative as well. Oh, you can't use, it must be greater than 0. Okay, so you can use negative. So you can basically use 1. Look at that. You can use 1, access 1. You can access 2, right, and then you can access 3, and the list goes on and on. You can even say 4, and then it will return null for most of the value, right. So you can basically, it allows you to access different role within that frame, okay, based on the order by. Okay, I hope this has been helpful to you guys. Let me know what you think in the comment. And at this point, I want to say thank you for listening and watching, and I will see you in the next one.